Welcome. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are diving into a completely fascinating breakdown of how we can, well, basically overhaul our outdated educational systems. We're going to look at some incredible research. This is from a 2023 study published in the International Journal of Social Sciences and Educational Studies. It explores a radical shift in how we teach, how we learn, and how we actually retain information. So, if you care about learning efficiently and effectively, this explainer is absolutely for you. Let's get into it. Be honest for a second. Think back to your own past learning experiences. Have you ever sat in a classroom and felt exactly like an empty vase, like you were just sitting there waiting to be filled up with facts and dates? This is a really powerful metaphor from the foundational educational theorist Paulo Freire. He argued that traditional schools treat students as passive receptacles. You literally just sit there, right? Waiting to be filled up with formulas by an instructor. It's a striking image for sure, but as we'll see, it's actually a fundamentally flawed way to achieve true understanding. And to figure out how to fix education, we first need to understand what's broken.
Section 1. The banking model of education.
So the banking system is essentially a transactional model. Think of it like this. Teachers act like bank tellers who just deposit information directly into students' minds. And the students, well, they're simply the depositories. They receive the information, memorize it, and repeat it back on an exam. Freire theorized that in this traditional model, teachers hold absolute, unquestioned power. And the real tragedy here is that learning is reduced to a simple memory game. The idea is the more a student repeats, the better their recall. But, and this is a big but, recall is not the same as true, deep understanding. Which brings us to the alternative.
Okay, let's dive into this next part. Section 2. The problem-posing solution. The crucial point is really captured when we compare these two directly. On one side, we have that banking system, relying on passive receivers, absolute teacher power, and rote memory. But then look at the problem-posing system. Here, students actually become active agents in their own learning. Instead of the teacher having absolute power, there's a shared, two-way dialogue. Instead of rote memory, you get critical thinking. But actually, let's be real here. To make this work, this system forces educators to do something incredibly difficult. They have to give up absolute control. And in return, students have to step up and take active responsibility for what and how they learn.
And this brilliantly illustrates why this shift matters far beyond just getting better test scores. Scholar Gloria Ladson-Billings points out that this critical, two-way dialogue isn't just a clever classroom trick to keep kids awake. No, it's literally a tool for societal emancipation. When students learn to question and dialogue in the classroom, they develop the critical perspective needed to identify and challenge real-world inequalities. They transform from passive subjects into active citizens capable of self-government. But you might be wondering, how do educators actually measure this kind of profound shift in thinking? Like, how do we track a student moving from a passive receiver to a critical thinker?
Section 3. Climbing Bloom's Taxonomy.
You might have heard of this, Bloom's Taxonomy. It's a renowned framework that visualizes the hierarchy of learning. Let's walk up these 6 steps together. We start at the bottom with Step 1, remembering, and Step 2, understanding. Now, standard educational systems often stall right here. Reaching understanding is considered a huge success. But our goal today, and really the whole goal of critical pedagogy, is to climb all the way up to Step 5, evaluating, and Step 6, creating. This is the highest order of cognitive skills. This is where students aren't just reciting knowledge, they're actively using it to build something entirely new. So let's move out of academic theory and into a real-world setting to see if these high-level concepts actually work in practice.
Section 4. The classroom experiment.
Let's break down the specific details of this really fascinating 2021 to 2022 university study. Researchers took 2 classes of 20 students each at Tishk International University in Kurdistan. This was in English as a Foreign Language, or EFL, context. Now remember Paulo Freire? We talked about him earlier. He claimed that the fundamental step in problem-posing education is identifying what he called a generative theme. So, the researchers brilliantly used the students' own daily struggles with learning English as the core problem they needed to solve together. They made the learning deeply, deeply personal. To establish a baseline, the researchers first used standard objective curriculum questions. For example, after reading an article about explorers, they asked, how long does it take to complete the expedition to Australia? Now think about Bloom's taxonomy for a second. This question only triggers the absolute lowest level of cognition, simple recall, remembering. There's exactly one right answer, and it requires 0 critical thought to find it. You're just regurgitating a fact. But then, the researchers instantly pivoted to a problem-posing approach. They asked, arrange an expedition to one of the historical places in Kurdistan. Do you see the difference there? It's a real game changer.
This is a high-level subjective challenge. There's no single correct answer you can just memorize from a textbook. This prompt forces the students to jump straight to the top of Bloom's taxonomy. They have to analyze the geography, evaluate the logistics, and synthesize a creative plan. It's an entirely different way of using their brains. So what actually happened when these students were suddenly asked to think for themselves rather than just memorize?
Section 5. Results, resistance, and rewards.
Well, the data shows massive initial resistance. According to the first observation, 70% of the students easily engaged with those basic, low-level knowledge questions, mostly because that's what they were used to. But when hit with the higher-level problem-posing questions, only 30% of the students could initially interact with them. This data proves an incredibly important point. Stepping away from the banking system is an uphill battle. You literally cannot simply flip a switch and expect students to instantly become critical thinkers overnight. The researchers broke down exactly why the students struggled so much at first, and the reasons are honestly incredibly revealing. Many just lacked the simple confidence to speak up. Others lacked the ability to clearly explain their subjective ideas. But the biggest barrier? They were conditioned by years of traditional schooling to study strictly for high grades, heavily relying on objective multiple-choice testing. Think about it. Objective assessments train students to find the one safe, right answer. It actively trains them to avoid taking intellectual risks. But as the semester progressed, something magical happened. The emotional engagement of the problem-posing method finally overtook their initial fear of being wrong. As the study beautifully notes, it was curiosity that drove them to find out more. Because they were working on a problem that was actually relevant to their own lives, they became motivated to investigate potential answers. It made them feel useful. It made them feel responsible. They weren't just passing a test anymore. They were solving a real problem. And the final results were just incredible. Before the intervention, students worked alone, relied on rote vocabulary memory, and basically engaged in passive listening. But after embracing critical pedagogy, the researchers observed that students now preferred pair work. They developed vastly enhanced communication skills, and they were able to work independently and confidently in the target language. They successfully shifted their cognitive level from simple understanding all the way up to applying, analyzing, and synthesizing. The whole shebang. They completely transformed into active communicative agents. Which brings us to a question I want to leave you with today. Was your own education a banking system? How much of your potential was maybe locked away by an over-reliance on multiple-choice objective testing? But more importantly, how can you apply critical pedagogy to your own lifelong learning right now? Stop waiting to be filled with facts. Start posing complex, relevant problems in your daily life and force yourself to climb to that highest order of thinking. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning, keep evaluating, and keep creating.